Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us for this Vectorworks presentation. My name's Tom White, and I'm the Spotlight Industry Specialist here at Vectorworks. My background is a production electrician, ETC EOS programmer, and occasional lighting designer. And I now work full-time with Vectorworks. If you're new to the software, and if you're looking at trying to understand how you can get hold of it, it's completely free for students and educational establishments. If you've not used Vectorworks before and you just want to try a go and see what you think, we do an unrestricted evaluation version for 30 days. And after that period, as the industry begins to gain momentum, we're also doing 30-day licenses where you can rent the software for a reduced price for 30 days. Now, in terms of training content, there's a whole host of free training content at university.vectorworks.net, and we're still running our training courses free of charge currently, our essential courses, and they can be found at vectorworks.net/events. Today's presentation is going to be looking at some of the new features in Service Pack 3 and some of the event design toolset. So without further ado, let's start the presentation.
Okay, so after that brief introduction, I'm just going to do a slight recap of what we're going to be covering. So we're going to be looking at designing a conceptual event, a conference style event, and how to create sheet layers and drawings from that event, but also more importantly, how do you create really realistic visuals and convince those clients that you are the event design company to entrust for their particular event. So what we're going to be looking at then is how to create some of the plugin shapes of Vectorworks, such as seating, staging, and then we'll look at adding things from the resource manager, and then straight on to working with rendering. So looking at the Renderworks camera tool, various different render styles, exporting 3D panoramas from Vectorworks. We'll also take you through how to create a fly-through animation using Vectorworks as well. And then finally, we're going to be talking about the new Datasmith file export from Vectorworks 2021. In Service Pack 3, we introduced direct functionality for Twinmotion. So you can export your project straight from Vectorworks into Twinmotion. We're going to do that with the project we're looking at today, and it'll give you a rough idea of the kind of quality you can expect and how well the workflow is integrated. Without further ado, let's have a look. This is a new thing for Vectorworks now. We have sample projects on our Vectorworks University that our Vectorworks users can download and just get a really good idea of what kind of ways they should maybe look at organizing their files, etc. Some really nice render styles and Renderworks textures as well to share and borrow. So this is what you can typically expect from Vectorworks in terms of the sheet layer, the drawings. Everything you see is fully customizable. The first part of the process of designing an event will be to import a venue, so a 2D line drawing. However, with simplistic 2D geometry, you can run the event design, create room, etc. And that will essentially give you a venue that you can work with. Now, once you have run a create venue command, it's very easy just to go through the windows and doors toolset, just to drop windows and doors into the actual building model itself. It's relatively straightforward. I'm just going to navigate around the model. As you can see, there's a bit of work been done. I'm doing this with one of the amazing 3D Connection Space Mice, which is definitely, if you're going to be doing lots of drawing, it's definitely well worth the investment. I've also got the 3D Connection CAD mouse, which is great because it also gives you the ability to put your favorite tools on your mouse cursor as well, which is brilliant. So let's have a look at our venue then. This time we'll look at it with the Clip Cube tool. The Clip Cube tool is hidden away in this menu down here to the right hand side. What the Clip Cube enables you to do is it enables you to section the model and just move through it. So in terms of if you're trying to work with a fairly tricky and fiddly 3D model, it makes working inside other geometry really easy and straightforward. Now, as well as moving the faces and sides of the Clip Cube, I can also pick up the whole Clip Cube. I just select it for a moment, and I can reposition it anywhere I like so. I can also rotate the Clip Cube as well, so if I want it on an angle I can do that as well. Now, the other real advantage to this Clip Cube is I can right click on any face and I can make a picture of that. So I make a really easy section viewport of that and tell it which sheet load I want to send it to. So it's a really versatile tool, and as you can see here, as I trigger this save view, the clip cube can be saved into a various orientation just to make navigating those 3D models really easy. Okay, so we've got our venue. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to create some carpet or flooring in the venue. As you can see, there's just a concrete floor in here at the moment. I'm going to create some dark grey Harlequin or Marley, for example. And the way we do that in Vectorworks usually would be by just using the polyline tool and tracing around the geometry in the room. You can see the polyline tool has different modes. So if I just start here and go across here. Now when I need to get to a curved mode, I can just hit the letter U just to toggle across like so, and I can begin to put in this curved geometry. Okay, now if I make a mistake like I've just done, I'm just going to hit the backspace just to undo a couple of steps. Okay, so you can use the polyline tool to trace around things. You'll also see the polyline tool a lot when we look at some of our other plugins, such as the lighting pipe tool or the soft goods tool later on. So being able to master the polyline tool is actually really important. Now, as well as obviously just tracing inside objects to create this geometry is useful. However, did you know with the 2D polygon tool, I can just use the paint bucket fill mode, and it's going to fill a shape inside here, as you can see. So if I just click and display that, there we are, you see. So you can just actually fill an existing shape, so it's really fast. If I run the extrude command, which is Control E on a PC or Command E on a Mac, I can then just enter a thickness for my flooring, for example. Okay, and if you were to have a look at this now in a 3D isometric view, you'll see here's the floor. I've then got on the render tab, I can apply a texture to that floor. So if we just have a quick look at that rendered, there we go. So we've just created a very quick floor in a matter of seconds. If we just put ourselves back into a top plan view, let's now look at creating a stage in this area here. Now, as well as using the polyline tool, you can actually just combine shapes in Vectorworks. If I were to select these two shapes together, I could run the add surface command, which essentially creates a singular closed shape like this. And once I've done this, I can then select that shape and run the event design create stage command. And if we have a look at the create stage dialog for a moment, as you can see, it's fully customizable in here. You can also, if you want to, put imperial measurements in as well. Vectorworks understands what you're trying to create. Now, once you've told it your deck widths and heights, you can then say whether you want it to be legs. You can also fill out the information for those legs. So I guess they'll be 48mm scaff, for example. However, let's have a nice skirting, like a nice border around our stage. Once you've selected this, obviously you can see various other things become locked out based on the kind of selection you make here. If we just have a look at the 3D options tab, however, I can now colour in or choose custom textures for my border and for the top of my decks as well. Now I've made this already, so I've run this command once before. This is what gets created. So you can see here that it uses stage deck objects where applicable and appropriate, where it tries to fill this shape in the most efficient way. And for any deck that isn't a standard, okay, that will need to be manufactured, it then creates a custom stage plug device for that shape. You can then also create detail viewports of this area for your construction drawings. And again, this is a fully hybrid object, and when I say that, it has a 2D appearance for the top plan drawing, and it also has a 3D appearance as well, as you can see here. So it's a fully functioning 3D deck like so, with a border. Okay, so once we've done that, we're just going to pop back to a top plan view again, and we're going to use the create seating section tool. Now with the create seating section tool, you will see our friend the polyline tool comes back. We can either trace a brand new polyline, or I wanted to show you this as it's a way of creating geometry for plugins by using a command called clip surface. So again, we're using two shapes, so we're using a rectangle, and we have an arc positioned above the shape. And again, you can use the command B and Command F shortcuts to send to the front and send to the back. Now, once you have these two shapes selected, you can then run the clip surface command, which is basically the opposite of add surface. And this is what you get left with, which is the top shape essentially cuts itself through the bottom shape. You'll need to remove the excess shape, as I've already done so here. Once we've done this, we can now use this shape to create our seating section. So again, we're not using the polygon mode as I discussed earlier. We've already created the shape, so we're going to use the paint bucket mode. So I can click once to select the shape. I'm just going to then specify the downstage center point of my seats, so the front center row. When I've done this, I can click to place the focus line. A focus line is basically the direction upon which they are looking. So I'm just going to draw a nice straight line, hold down Shift so it snaps to a vertical line, and I'm going to click again. This will now open the Create Seating Section dialog. So we've got a couple of different choices between standard and curved. We can also change the seat spacing. Again, if you needed to adhere to any kind of social distancing, you could just enter the desired spacing that you wanted. There we go. Okay, so that's entirely possible as well. Just change that back for a moment. You can also say how you want to measure it. Now, the boundary, that's the shape that we drew initially with those two shapes in the clip surface command. So we can say that actually we've got a bit of space before the fire exit comes into play, so we can actually allow chairs to go over that distance by a certain amount, which we would dictate here. The other things that are important here would be the total rise, so the total height of the back row, for example, or the total rise per row as well. That's possible. In terms of the seats themselves, I can choose any of the Vectorworks symbols in here. I can also choose chairs and tables, cabaret style. Now, people often say to me, can you use your own furniture with this tool? And yes, you can. You just need to make sure that you have attached the event planning record to the symbol in the resource manager. And then you can use any custom geometry you want to create your seating section. Okay, so now let's just have a quick look at the seating section. I think we should just give it a little name. So I'm going to call this main. And now I'm going to say, yes, please number the seats and please number the rows. And you'll notice that it's put the text on there, which is great. And although it's a numbering command, because we started at the letter A, it's going to increment A, B, C, D, E, F, G, etc. Now, with that boundary that we created earlier and the software understanding how far over the boundary you can go, it then becomes possible to tell Vectorworks what the total number of seats you require to be is. So it's always worth drawing your seating sections a little bit bigger than you need to be, and then you can restrict down, and then when the client asks you that they need more seats, you can literally just change the number in this dialog here. Angle's not important, that's normally for straight seating, but we've got some curved seating, which is fine. But classes, all of the elements that get created by this builder, you've got the ability to classify them individually, so you can show various things on different drawings, etc. Now, I've already run this command once a second ago, so I'm just going to play that back. This is what gets created. Now, the seating section tool works remarkably well in conjunction with an aisle tool. The aisle tool, you can simply just draw a rectangular shape over the seats. As you can see here, I've drawn one just to the side. I can now pick up my aisle and position it over the seats, and then just drag and drop a copy over there as well. And you'll see what happens is that the aisle actually causes the seats to renumber themselves. So it saves you having to dip in, edit, rename and renumber, etc. Okay, so we'll take that as read that I've done those, and we can have a look at this in a 3D view now. So we can, the class that controls the aisles I've actually turned off, so we don't see the white rectangles, but you can see here that we still get the effect of the aisle tool itself on the seat, so we still see the gaps. Again, creating a lectern is really straightforward and easy. You can just use the create lectern command, and there are a handful in the library. However, you can also use this to make your own symbol, which you can then fully customize and edit. You can also import your own lectern symbols and have them pop up in this library as well. Okay, so once we've created a lectern, and again it's just placed onto the stage over there, we can then just create some soft goods for our backdrop. So again, in a top plan view, I'm just going to select the soft goods tool, and here you can see we've got our old friend the polyline again, and that is just simply a case of just literally just drawing whatever you want with this tool. Backspace if you make mistakes, etc. I'm going to hit X to cancel the tool for a moment. I just wanted to show you before we draw these that within the soft goods object properties, you can see here you can specify things like height, whether it's just a simple skirting border or a masking border, or whether it's exhibition style, pipe and drape. The pipe and drape command will also draw in the bases and the scaff as well. Now you can also get it to add other little details like add a 3D track, add a pipe, solenoids for a kabuki drop, etc. All of these things that you select, all of these options, these can then be reported in a worksheet, so then it becomes really easy to kind of get a really good spreadsheet of all of your materials that you need for the event, and in terms of creating quotes and hire costs, really straightforward. So the other thing that's just worth mentioning at this point is that we also have within Vectorworks itself, within the soft goods textures, we have the whole Gerrits range is in here for stage cloths. So if there's a specific texture that you want to get, 9 times out of 10 it will be in the library, and they're very easy to duplicate and edit these textures to get them to look exactly how you want. Okay. So again, once you've chosen the texture that you want, you can choose whether it's rope ties, webbing, what kind of fitting, etc. You can also dictate what the distributed weight is as well. You can enter that information so that you can then run a braceworks calculation on the cloth should you need to. And you can also display various text around the object, which I've actually turned off for now. So it's really comprehensive. The way I've decided to draw these soft goods is again just using the polyline tool. I spent a bit of time getting the first one correct, as you can see here. Every plugin object has a path as well, so you can always see the original polyline that I created to create the soft goods. And then I simply just use the mirror tool. It's a tool that's really worth showing you. With any object selected, you can then just actually draw a line, as you can see here, and then you can create a reflected copy on the other side. Anything that's remotely symmetrical you can do. So we can have a look at that in 3D now. I've also placed just an extruded shape behind here which has a photographic texture. I've created this texture. Again, they are very easy to create. If I were to just right click onto my extrude, I can locate the texture I've used, and you can see here I select edit. Now this wall texture I wanted to show you because I've decided to give it a slight glow transparency, as you can see there. So it just means that in the Vectorworks renderings it will be illuminated rather nicely. I've just added a couple of other bits and bobs from our resource library. So there's an image prop person just over there, and some product boxes on stage. Now let's just put in a couple of screens around the auditorium. Here's some I made earlier. They're really easy to place. You just grab the television screen tool, and then you just choose your aspect ratio and what kind of screen you want. Again, this library is customizable, so if you have all of your own screen content that you use on all of your events, you can customize this list to show your things as well. Now once you've selected them, it's literally a case of just click to insert and then rotate round, etc., and then do the same again, or use the mirror tool. Or there's various kind of duplicate array commands, duplicate along path as well that you can use for this. Let's just add some speakers in now. I've put some monitor speakers in just downstage here, as you can see, and I've got some speaker arrays, so I'll just very quickly show you the speaker tool. So the speaker tool, it used to be in Vectorworks that it used to only be able to reference a very small list of speakers unless you did something in the background to change which XML file it pointed to, which was a bit complicated. So we decided to streamline this workflow and make it much easier. You can now select the speaker tool and you can now choose any speaker in any of the libraries. So you've got a vast amount of speaker libraries in here which you can sort of have a look through. They all have the correct dispersion information available, so it just enables that once you've placed a speaker like so,
then you can do things like, let's turn on the dispersion, okay, and then we can see where it's looking, and well, you get a kind of rough idea of what effect it's going to have. Now the dispersion is rather neatly created within a class. So again, if we want to see that dispersion for a moment, I'm just going to have to turn that class on. There we go. Cool. So we kind of get a rough idea. There is a 2D hatch that gets displayed, which I've turned off for now. But again, it's very useful if you want to get a rough idea that you've got enough boxes for the seating area that you need to fill. Okay, so next thing to have a look at then, once we've placed our speakers, will be to look at the camera tool. So in 2020, we brought out the Spotlight camera tool. Which is just here in the event design toolset. The camera tool, the video camera tool, can be used to give you a good idea in terms of sight lines, etc. You can specify what kind of camera you want to use. So in this case, I'll just scroll down here. I have a 12x zoom lens on a Panasonic body, so I could choose a couple of different cameras in there, and I could also got the ability of playing around with depth of field, exposure settings, shutter speed, etc. So there's an awful lot of detail in this camera tool, and at any point I can then select the camera on the drawing and select activate camera, like so, which is really, really useful. So I can see what the camera sees. I can very easily refocus the camera using the aim. There's also a pan and a tilt, for example, as well. Let's nip back to a top plan view for a second. I'm going to show you something called multi-view, which in Vectorworks is triggered by hitting the letter M. It's really useful when working with this kind of workflow. So, for example, I can just simply select a camera. I can activate a camera there. So this is good if you're you're drawing something in 2D and you want to see it being built in 3D. You can just choose the cameras in the actual panes. Okay, let's have a look at this camera in that pane. And the same goes for rendering, so I can say, well, let's open GL, that one there, just so I can see what it's going to look like. Now the camera tool itself is often used in conjunction with the visualization palette, which becomes a really useful way to navigate around your cameras. So if you're placing cameras in the document, either Spotlight cameras or some of these, as you can see, are just Renderworks cameras, which are essentially the same. You get the same results from them. You can see here how we can actually see our cameras in the document. We can all give them unique names, and we can switch between those cameras as well. So if you're looking for a way to quickly toggle between cameras, that palette is particularly useful. Okay, I'm going to turn multi-view off now by hitting M. Now again, I talked earlier about the camera tool and viewports. So if you have a camera active, as you can see I have here, I can now ask Vectorworks to make a picture with this camera. So I can go View, Create a Viewport. I know it's currently wireframe, but don't worry, we can render it afterwards on the sheet layer. As you can see here, we get a couple of different choices. We can either say, right, yeah, that's it, don't need the camera now, I've taken my picture. You can remove it. You can always edit the original camera through the viewport, but it's going to remove it from the design layer. The second option is the option I'm going to go for. I'm going to take my photo and I'm going to leave a camera on the design layer. So if I want to make another picture in future, I've got a camera already set up and ready to go. And once I have opened the Create Viewport dialog, I then just need to tell it exactly which sheet layer I want to send it to. The key tip here is if you're using cameras to make viewports of your design, please make sure that the sheet layer itself has got a DPI of at least 150, maybe 200, depending on the size of the image that you want to create. Okay, so I'm going to click cancel because I've already done this. So I'm going to take you to my camera viewports. So these are my camera viewports again. You can get much better results, rendering results, by rendering on a viewport on a sheet, which you can see here. We've got some air, it's got some beams of light in the air, some lit fog, for example, and some of these cameras are using the exposure and bloom settings as well. So these are the viewports that I have created from the cameras, and again, in terms of choosing their render style, it's literally a case of selecting the viewport and choosing a render style in here. Just a couple of render styles that are new to 2021. Realistic Spotlight is one of them, and Preview Spotlight is another. So if you're new to the software, I'd recommend you having a look at those. What I have done in this file, I've created my own custom render style, which again is if you've been using Vectorworks for a while and this isn't something you've gone into yet, I really encourage you to do this because you can get some really remarkable results in a really short space of time. So if we just have a look at this render style I've created, we can give it a name, and then we can say what kind of things we want to include in the render style. So I want smoothness of edges, I've turned anti-aliasing on, I've got shadows off at the moment, which is interesting. As you see, the images still look pretty good and pretty realistic, but it's much quicker to render without shadows. So some images, like the image above, we can render without shadows, and the image below has got shadows turned on, as you can see. Now, other things you can do in here, I won't go into too much detail, but grass would be any kind of thick textures, such as grass or carpet, for example. And caustics would be refracted light in glass. So any particular mirrored scenic items that you've got in your model, again, you'll need to tweak and turn these on. You can come in and edit the renderwork style as often as you like. I recommend creating new renderwork styles each time and then choosing the renderwork style from the viewport object info palette. Obviously we can tweak the quality levels based on what kind of geometry we have in there. If I didn't have any curved geometry, I'd probably leave that set to low. And again, we've got most of the ambient lighting is turned off. We've got some ambient occlusion, which just means some shading, as you can see. We could have artistic edges if we wanted to. The background in this case is just a plain background, but it is possible to use any HDRI that you want to upload or use one of the stock ones as well. And that's how you edit and create a render style. It's just a case of new renderwork, right-clicking into the resource manager and selecting new renderwork style. Okay, so I'll take you to a light plot layer where I've already created this in just a moment, but just to give you a quick idea. With the Insert Truss tool, I can select, again, I've got a big choice of manufacturer's truss in here. There are the standard libraries that ship with Vectorworks, and we also have some subscription libraries as well. Now here we can say I want to use the distributed mode, the 4 meter length, so I can start to draw my line like so, and I can say that please draw a 12 meter line on that axis, and there's my truss. Again, I can easily create copies of this as well, holding down the Alt key. I can add loads of sections of truss together. So if I were to take these two and say I want to add you onto there, for example, and then obviously I can create another span of truss like so. So again, it's really quick and easy. And then once I've selected my truss objects, I can assign a Z value, or I can say, let's change the trim height. So I can then say, well, change it to an absolute height, which would basically give it 6 meters, for example, and relative is from where it is now, so take it up 300 millimeters, for example. That's how that works. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, I've just got a very simple generic design in here, which I've turned some fixtures on. So if I just show you my light plot for a second, there we go, and I've already entered the channel and color and information data for each of these fixtures. And again, focusing fixtures is actually really easy and straightforward. As you can see, all of these paths are kind of splayed out. And the way I did this was using the brand new Focus Instruments tool, or rather Focus Instruments along a path. So what I can do here is I can select a whole bunch of these fixtures, right click on them and select Focus Lighting Devices. As you can see, where they're all focused, I can home them to start from the beginning, and I can also tilt them, and I can center fan, for example, so I can fan them out like so. So you're kind of really versatile in terms of how you want to focus these lighting devices. If I just click cancel for a second, I wanted to show you the Focus Lighting Devices along a path command, which is just here. So Focus Lighting Devices along a path. I haven't created the path object yet, but just to give you an idea, I can select a curve, and I can then say, please focus these lighting devices like so. So again, pretty versatile. Once you've focused them, it's then possible to right click on the lighting devices and select turn on, for example. I'll just show you the edit light command. So in here you can see they've got a brightness. Again, I've gone significantly higher than 100. I've set the fall off to realistic. As you can see from the camera renderings, it looks fantastic. It slows down the render time a lot. You could make the render time a bit quicker. Smooth works really well as well, but I tend to like realistic, so I've set that there. I've also asked the beams of light to be visible with lit fog, so just to have some haze in the atmosphere, and I've asked them to cast shadows. But again, if cast shadows is turned off in the render style, you won't see that. Okay, so how do we then see what they look like? So again, in a sort of 3D view, you won't really see a great deal if you're in the render mode OpenGL. I recommend you now start to look at Preview Spotlight, for example. So if we just, I've set up a 3D view just over here, like so, with all the elements in it. You also notice that my truss has this skin over the top of it, and that is created with the Simplify class. So if you ever see that, and you want to see the truss cords, just toggle that class off and you'll see them. I'm actually going to leave that turned on because the priority for me with this image is having a look at the lighting devices and to see what they look like. So if I just were to go to the teapot up here and select Renderworks Style, and then I'm going to select Preview Spotlight. So the Preview Spotlight render mode, you'll see in a moment, it does all of the beams in lit fog, for example. Any kind of reflective textures are reflective. Any light emitting textures such as the screen we're looking at. Now we've seen it in Preview Spotlight, I'm going to turn back to OpenGL. Again, I don't really have much time today to talk to you about all the plugins we have. But again, just to make you aware that as we've kind of mocked up this event, I've also used the Braceworks plugin, which is actually just going to move in here. I can now see exactly how much force in kilonewtons is going through all of the structural elements of my design. So in this case, it's the truss, for example. You'll also see that another useful new feature in 2021 is the ability to show wraps in terms of slings and rigging and exactly how truss objects are attached to their hoists. But the purpose of this discussion, this talk that we're doing, is really about the visuals in terms of how to get really great looking drawings out using Vectorworks. So let's have a look at the first option, which would be an export a 3D panorama from Vectorworks. The command that's really useful at this moment in time is the view, set 3D view, and again I'm just going to click once and position myself in the auditorium looking in a particular direction, like so. I'm going to say, right, I'm at 1500 millimeters high. Let's do the same in terms of the height award. Okay, so once you've positioned yourself in your venue, do be sure to save your view. So this just means you'll be able to come back and view it again in future, and then potentially export a separate 3D panorama if you want to. So in terms of exporting the panorama, I'm just going to go to File, Export Panorama, 3D only. And again, that Renderworks style I showed you earlier, we can choose our own custom Renderworks style here, and then we can specify resolution to use. And this is interesting. So we don't have to use your computer to do this. If you're on the VSS subscription package, which basically just means you get the latest version of the software each year, this is one of the other perks. So you can actually render out this panorama using our software, and you can get a link to send to your client where they can come and view and make notes on the panoramic image as well. So at this point I could just click export like so. It's going to send me a link and a QR code. Okay, and this is what the client sees when they open the other end. As you can see, we've got some light emitting textures, realistic daylight from outside, etc., and a nice reflective floor and pretty realistic furniture as well. And all of this has been rendered using the cloud services. The next thing I'm going to show you is how you can create a fly-through of your model. So again, it used to be, this command used to work in conjunction with the save views where you can stitch them together. If you still really like that workflow, you can still use it. However, you can now also use the polyline tool to draw any kind of curved line through the model that you like. And then once your polyline's been drawn, you can then select it and go to Model, Create Animation, and create a walkthrough path from that selection. And you can see here we have our Renderworks camera along our path.
Now what we can do here is along the path we can actually go to specific keyframes at given times. So you can see here if I were to just skip through to the next keyframe and then to the next keyframe after that, so just go back to the beginning and then just work my way through. Now at any point on this path I can pick up the front of the camera and I can move the camera and say, right, well this time I want you to focus at the stage and I want you to zoom in at that point as well. So you could do this in 2D. It's often a good idea to do this workflow in 2D first, and then when you're ready to finesse it, select Activate Camera View, and then at any of the given keyframe steps you can activate the camera view, and then you can actually focus the camera from the perspective of being inside the auditorium and the model. So you can see here I'm zoomed right in here, so I can also change where I want to focus. So let's look at our speaker, for example. Okay, and then I can then say, right, show me what the next keyframe looks like. The next keyframe the camera's looking at there, which isn't very helpful. It's also very narrow, isn't it? So if we just scroll down here, we can also change the viewing angle that we're looking at it in. Okay, so once you've set up all the individual keyframes, we can then select our movie path, as it were, and we can say, right, let's create the movie. Now this is very similar to the export 3D panorama. You've got the ability to specify the render style, the resolution of the film. So at the minute I've gone for this 4K UHD TV. And then all you need to do is a case of just clicking Save Me. You can see here I'm using this on the Vectorworks cloud as well. So what I might just do is I might just slow down this because it tends to be a little bit quicker. So if I just get the cloud services to do it, I'll click Save Movie. So as you can see, an awful lot of the renderings can be accomplished within Vectorworks itself. If I were to just take you through some of the other sheet layers now, and as you can see here, we've got all of the usual sheet layers and viewports you'd expect from a typical event. So we've got our light plot, lighting plan, etc. We've got the ability to detail exactly how many fixtures we're using, where they're coming from. We've also got the dispersion from the speaker arrays, which we can see in this viewport, like so. And I haven't had a chance to talk to you today about ConnectCAD, but we also now have a schematics tool within Vectorworks where you can create schematics for all of your Spotlight elements as well. So it really is now a complete package in terms of what you're capable of outputting. Here's a viewport of the braceworks calculations showing the loadings on the specific truss. And as we have a few bridles in the show, there are some bridle diagrams here as well, so we can see how they go together. So Twinmotion by Epic Games is a render engine, and what that enables you to do is it enables you to create a model in Vectorworks like this. It's not a modeling software, it is just a rendering package, so you need to create the show somewhere else first. And then what you can see now in Vectorworks is we now have a native export. Now it's not going to export the lighting devices at present, but I'm going to show you how to create some very simple and really effective looks in Twinmotion. So this is the model that we're going to send, as you can see here. Okay, so I've just opened Twinmotion 2021. Twinmotion will open into a new blank document here. You can change the background as well, should you want to, but again, we're doing an indoor event, so it's less important to us. So I'm just going to click Import and select my Datasmith file and click Open. And this is just the file that we exported from Vectorworks. It exports it in a folder with all of the textures and resources around so that Twinmotion can import it correctly. Okay, so it's imported the model. As you can see, it's got most of the textures look pretty good. Some of them might need a little bit of work, so the truss looks a little bit drab, so we should probably change that. So changing textures in Twinmotion is really simple. So if we just select metal, choose chrome, I'm just going to drag and drop it onto the truss. Now it understands that those items should have the same texture, so by just changing the texture on one truss, it's changed it on all of them. So if we just knock it back a touch, as you can see, they've now all got that texture applied. Great. So very straightforward. You can make lots of changes in a very short space of time. Let's now just change the floor texture because it could do with being a little bit more interesting, as you can see. So again, that's exactly the same as before. So come up to here, I'm going to choose plastic. And I'm going to say, right, let's just find some classic linoleum, like so, and just drag and drop it onto there. Now once you place the texture, you don't have to put up with that colour at all. You can just say, right, I want to use a different colour. We'll go for a dark grey, maybe with a slightly blue tint. I can choose how reflective I want the texture to be, like so, which is very useful. Now, you can do this with all the textures if you want to. Again, it understands all of the items that should be together. Now, as you can see, our image prop doesn't look too good in Twinmotion, so I'm just going to delete her. And let's place some of the Twinmotion characters in the model. So if we just have a quick look at what we've got. So again, we were looking at materials, so I'll just set back to characters. And let's have some animated humans. So if I now say, let's place you onto our stage. That's great. So once you've placed the character, you can use this yellow arc just to rotate them round and have them facing the right way, for example. Great. I'm just going to zoom in a touch. Now we can see what she's doing at the moment. If we just select her, we can say, right, the minute you are in an idle pose, so we can just say that, could you be speaking? That would be great. Give me a talk, thank you very much. So you can also change what they're wearing, etc., their cloth colour through different presets. Right. The thing I really like about this is placing random groups of people, which is really great. Because every time you place a random group, it looks completely different. So they all wear slightly different costumes. So it means that placing crowds is really straightforward. Okay, so that's texturing and adding in characters. Let's just add in a few lights. Okay, now as you can see out the window, it's currently daytime. So let's just change the time of day slightly. Let's just change that to be, let's go for evening, like so. There we go. You can also change season as well if you're not getting the results you want. I just thought I would show you some of the lighting tools. Now, a couple of different lighting tools that we have. Let's just get some of those. I've accidentally moved my floor, but don't worry, I'll fix that. It's fine. Okay, so in here we go to lights. First thing I'm going to show you is an area light, which is really useful. Just drag and drop that in the middle of the room. You can then set it to be at a particular height. Once you've set your area light to be at a particular height, you can then change the intensity, like so, the attenuation of the light itself. And then we have a width and a height setting. So if you just want to light the room very quickly and easily, just a bit of ambient light in the model, for example, change the color temperature, change the intensity, turn shadows on, like so. So again, just lighting the model is really easy. Let's now delete this and put some spotlights in. So I'm just going to drag and drop a single spotlight device in, like so. And again, exactly the same way again, let's just set it to a particular height. There we go, and I'm going to make it nice and bright so we can see what we're doing. And again, we can tweak the angle so we could have quite a narrow beam of light. And we could also have some haze as well. Now, there's a quantity with the haze, so if we just select more, we can then say let's just keep the haze at a low level. And if I just go back to the rest of the lighting options, we can then choose a colour. So if I just select choose a colour, there we go. Now this may seem slightly labour intensive. Once you've chosen a colour, you can also focus them as well. So if I just select, if you click on here, you've got move or rotate. So I can now say, well, let's point you that way, for example. And then if I were to make a copy of this, and then I were to paste another copy onto the other side, Now when I paste my copy, Twinmotion will say, is it a copy, completely unique, or is it an instance? And this is actually really useful with lighting devices. So when you paste it as an instance in Twinmotion, it means that if in future you change your mind about what colour you want to use, it means that you only have to edit one of them and both of them will update. Okay, so again, it's not really a pre-visualization tool, but it's really useful for creating a very quick mock-up of a model to send to a client. Okay, so I'm just going to delete these lighting devices. Now I've spent about 35 to 40 minutes with this model in another file, and I'm going to open that particular model so I can show you how you can create a fly-through animation. Okay, so here's the model that I spent a bit of time on. Again, I didn't really show you this in the Vectorworks file, but this is the exterior of the venue. There's a big glass panels at the front. I'm just going to take you through how to create a video. So if we just were to go to Media and then select Video, and there's some I created already, but if we just click to create a new video. Perfect, so this is going to be our opening frame. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to fly down to the doorway so we can choose our second frame. Now at any point in this process you can also change time of day, so it's possible to do sort of time-lapse effects, etc. And if we had more characters walking around and milling about, you could do that. There's also traffic as well if you want a busy traffic outside. So I'm just going to navigate to this doorway and I'm going to specify this to be the second frame. So I'm creating another keyframe there, really straightforward, and then I'm just going to zoom through the box office like so, gone quite low down, make this one the second frame, and again I'm now just going to head through the doorway like so, maybe create a third frame at this point. Okay, then I'll specify this to be another keyframe. And then lastly, over the other side, I can then say exactly where I want to end up. And that's basically how you stitch a movie together. At any point in this process, I can click on the settings for my movie. And I can look at things such as the weather, the lighting, and then if I just change the camera, I can do things like lens, flare, effects, etc., field of view and depth of view. Okay, now once I've finished creating this, it's possible for me to go back and just view it. So I can just say come over here. I can also change the duration as well. And I can just click play and I can watch what I've made, etc. So you kind of get the general gist. Now I can spend a bit of time finessing that. And then when I'm ready, as it's a bit jumpy now, but this is just simply a preview as well. Okay, so now I've finished. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to export and say I want to export that video, please. Choose video 3 and just hit select and start the export. And over a few minutes, it's going to be churning away, working on creating that export. As I mentioned earlier, I've completed part of this process before, so I'm just going to show you now the exact kind of fly through that you can expect from Twinmotion. Okay, so that takes us to the end of our presentation. I'd like to thank you all for watching. We're running our current Essentials training courses, and they can be found on the Vectorworks event notice board, so please get in touch with us if you want to attend any of those. Do also check out the Vectorworks University for a whole host of free training content. So I'd just like to open the floor out and say, does anybody have any questions? Thanks very much for joining me on today's presentation. Just in case any of you had any issues with maybe your bandwidth dropping out during the presentation, you will be able to access the recording through the Plaza website at a later date.
Other things I thought would be good to talk about as well before we go into some of the questions that were asked during the presentation is there's now a Vectorworks public roadmap. So in terms of the feature updates for the software and kind of where we're going with the program, the web address is a bit convoluted, but if you were to Google the Vectorworks roadmap or have a look for it through our Vectorworks forum, you'll be able to find the link. And on the roadmap page, what you can do is you can kind of upvote for your favorite feature requests and improvements. So it's definitely worth checking out, and it would really help us get an idea of what our focus should be over the next year or so. So I had a few questions during the course of the presentation. Roger Neal asked, will it be possible to play out live animation from a VJ point of view? And it's not currently possible in Vectorworks to do that, but we have a visualization program ourselves called Vision, where you can export the design as an MVR file. Now, Vision can import 2 NDI streams. I know that's not a huge amount of streams, but in terms of just playing out some rough ideas on a model, you definitely be able to do that. The other thing to bear in mind is that Vectorworks, if you own the perpetual license, you get Vision for free. You get 2 universes of DMX of Vision for free, and that would include the 2 NDI streams. So it's possible that you can currently do that workflow in Vision. We also have a plugin with Disguise, where you can use the Disguise camera inside the Vision model. So you can then kind of link the two as a previs program. Had another question from Molly Campbell about how line weight can be used better within the program. It can be difficult to set this up and experiment with the correct line weights. I definitely recommend using styles for line weights. You can create line styles in the resource manager. And now you can also use classes to enforce those graphical attributes, so kind of force the line styles. So once you've worked out what works for you, I often find to get the line weights that I like, I actually print off an A4 document of line weights and then work out which is correct and which ones I prefer, and then I'll use classes and styles to define them. Interestingly, he said we'd like to see an integration with the iPad and the Apple Pencil to draw annotations of proper line weights. And you can currently annotate your sheet layers through the Vectorworks Nomad app. In terms of line weight control for those annotations, I think that's a really good feature request, and I'll contact the product development team after this meeting and we'll request that, because at the moment I think you can only do that in one particular style. George asked, it noticed the program getting slower with 3D files, and what would the recommended hardware specifications be? First thing, if you're using Vectorworks 2021, we introduced a new feature in the document settings called VGM cache. And with this checked, you'll notice that the redraw on your geometry when you're navigating 3D views will be much faster. It kind of caches every conceivable view of the model. So it just means that initial change from a top plan view to an isometric view will take a little bit longer. But after that, you should notice it should actually get quicker and actually speed up. The other thing, just to check, it might be worth having a look at your files as well. Just please feel free to contact us at support, and I can have a look at it with you. I'm more than happy to do that. In terms of the specifications, what we'd recommend now is an Intel Core i5 or AMD Ryzen 5 or faster, a graphics card with at least 4 gigs of VRAM. No integrated cards. You need a dedicated graphics card, at least 4 gigs. Mine is a 2 gig card, and it is a bit slow, to be fair. I would love a 4 gig card. I think that's the next on my shopping list. You'll need 10 gigabytes of hard disk space, 1440 by 900 resolution. The resolution's a bit strange. You might find on some of the smaller MacBook and laptop models, some of the windows open rather peculiarly if you're running it in a smaller resolution. Also, just as a note, I kind of always been a Mac person, but I am seriously looking at some gaming PCs at the moment, as I think it'd be very capable Vectorworks machines. Now, one thing I can't really give too much away about this, but if you look at the Vectorworks roadmap, we're going to be integrating Redshift as a render engine into Vectorworks, and so a lot of the visuals that you were seeing in the Twinmotion, you'll get similar results within Vectorworks itself, and this is going to happen ideally in the autumn. I don't want to commit to a date at this point, but the one thing to bear in mind is when this Redshift integration happens, you will need that 4 gig graphics card. At the moment, all of the rendering in Vectorworks, in RenderWorks rather, is done on the CPU. And kind of moving forwards, we're going to be shifting that to the graphics card. So the graphics card will be key. So Dave Ingalls asked, what's the best way to conduct an initial site survey to get your 3D venue into the program? I would suggest using a laser scanning program, maybe like Faro or something like that. I can't give too much away. We have a number, but you can currently import point clouds into the software. It will accept a laser scanned point cloud. It's often better if you import them into segments and just trace over the geometry each time. We do have a number of plugins currently penned with point cloud software types. So I can't give anything else away on that, but that integration is kind of within the next year. We also have a research project with a company called Stageport, who are based up in Glasgow, and it's definitely worth having a look at their website. They're currently pioneering a digital workflow for scanning geometry for venues and auditoria and creating 3D BIM models. So if you want some more information with that, the company is Stageport, based up in Scotland. Matt Saunders asked, what's the Nomad measure tool like? And there is a program, there is an app we have called Nomad, and not many people are aware, but you can also get the Nomad app to use the iOS camera in the Apple iPhone in terms of measuring up a site, and it's pretty good. I find it really accurate within around sort of 50 or 60 meters. The larger the venue, the more it struggles. Although now that the iPhone 12 has got all the LiDAR scanning capabilities, I think this is going to radically improve our Nomad measure tool. So at the minute, the Nomad measure tool is only really as good as the camera. All of that hard bit is done with that hardware itself. So I think you can expect to see a lot of improvements with this. The other thing to mention with the current workflow is that if you are using the Nomad measure tool, it can generate a Vectorworks file for you, complete with walls of the venue. And then you can just simply run a modify scale objects command when you've opened that Vectorworks file just to resize it. So, even if it's a tiny bit out, then you'll find currently you can fix it. In terms of global referencing and GIS, so in 2021, we implemented GIS and georeferencing. I can't remember off the top of my head if it's available in the Spotlight package. I know it's in Designer. You can currently assign in Spotlight, you can assign a latitude and longitude for your current Vectorworks origin, which would help you designate exactly where things are. In terms of georeference data, yes, the global map of the world is also accessible through Vectorworks. Again, it's something that the Landmark package and the Landmark team use all the time within Vectorworks, so it's not necessarily a Spotlight feature, but I think it is. It's definitely in Designer. I'll need to check if it's in Spotlight. I can't give you any more information about that, unfortunately, because I don't know anything about it, with it being a Landmark feature, but that's definitely possible. One thing you alluded to was that would the Nomad app be able to do this? So in theory, I guess you're wondering is if you can wander around on site, a massive site, and have the Nomad app tell you where you are in that site and what pieces of equipment should be there, etc. And I think that's also a really great feature request for the cloud services team. So I'm going to send that on to them after this presentation. We're also in the process of having sort of discussions with What3Words and if there's any possible integration with What3Words and our software as well. So there's some really exciting things coming up in the future. Just check, see if there's any other questions in the list. Sure, no worries. I've just got an anonymous question about how much is Twinmotion. So Twinmotion is separate to Vectorworks 2021. It's not something we sell at all. It's quite reasonable. Of all the render packages, I can't give you prices because I don't know, because I don't work for them. But I'm sure a quick Google will give you a fairly good idea. But compared to something like Depends or some really high quality rendering software, it's really good value for money, I think. And the fact that you can then export it into Unreal Engine as well. I mean, the other things just to bear in mind is that Unreal Engine are doing all kinds of really interesting research into enabling DMX within their program and possible NDI streams. So I think it could be well worth making that investment into Twinmotion at this stage. I mean, the other thing to bear in mind is we also have this Datasmith export now, and on our roadmap, we're one day hoping once you implement the Datasmith export, it's only a matter of time before a live link could, feasibly become possible. So that's something that we're striving towards. But again, I can't kind of guarantee that at the moment, but this is the direction that we're heading in right now. Cool. So I think that's it for the questions. I don't think there's anything else. I think I'll just wrap this up. So yeah, have a look at the roadmap. It's really well worth it. And also check out Vectorworks University and our essential seminars at the minute. And also just get in touch with us. Feel free to email in. You find our contact details on the website. If you're having trouble with any large files, you can just contact us, and myself or the tech team can have a look and see if there's any pointers that we can give. So thanks once again for attending, and hopefully see you all again next time in person. Many thanks. Bye.